A Plaguelands Media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media bringing you another book review, graphic novel review, whatever you want to fucking call it. This is going to be a spoiler-filled look at the first 5 issues of Fables by Bill Willingham. Now, I hadn't read this in a long time. It'd be at least a decade. And I was going through my comics at work, because yes, in my office I have a bunch of graphic novels, and saw this on the shelf, picked it up and went, you know what, I want to read this again, and I am so fucking glad I did. This is fantastic. I love the fact that it takes fairy tale characters or characters from early fantasy literature like Alice in Wonderland, things like that, and puts them in modern society, and they have to kind of make by. This is, the first 5 issues at least, are pretty much a murder mystery. So without further ado, let's just get right into the next episode of So, Fables, Legends in Exile, Volume 1. Some great pictures. So we start once upon a time, of course. And we see someone who is hurrying in a taxi. We don't know who this person is. But they race in. They're looking for Big B. Wolf, who is the security officer in this building. We find out that this person that is running to find Big B. Wolf is Jack. Now, as you know from classic fairy tales, there is Jack and the Beanstalk, there's Jack Be Nimble, there's all kinds of Jacks. This is all of them, basically personified in one character. And he's come to report a possible murder of somebody. Now we have Belle and Beast, Beauty and the Beast. They are talking to Snow White, who is the director of operations. And what's happened is Beast is reverting back to his beast form, and it happens every time his wife, the Beauty, gets angry at him. And Snow White is basically trying to placate them, calm them down. We can see that, of course, this room looks kind of bigger from the inside than the outside. And here we have, I believe that's Little Boy Blue, who is in the background helping out. Snow White manages to placate Beauty and the Beast, and they have a bit of an argument because Belle brings up, Beauty, I should say, brings up that Snow White once lived with 7 dwarves, and that pisses Snow White off. And then Little Boy Blue says, never ever mention the dwarves. We move to a diner where we see Prince Charming. He has long since been divorced from Snow White. We find out that he actually had married all the other princesses as well and divorced from them. And he's chatting up a waitress. Because he is Prince Charming, he has this kind of charisma over women. He gets the waitress to pay for his meal, and then he ends up going back to her place. Big B Wolf, aka the Big Bad Wolf, lets Snow White know that there might possibly have been a murder, and it might possibly be her sister Rose Red. Those of you that are not familiar with Rose Red, the initial story was Snow White and Rose Red. So Rose and her sister have been estranged for a long time, and we find out that Rose likes to kind of party with what they call the Mundies, which are the mundane people. And these people all come from the fairy tale land, and they're all known as Fables. They have a bit of a confrontation. We go to the waitress's apartment where Prince Charming is basically making sexual innuendos about sword fighting and sex. Bigby and Snow White hurry to Rose Red's apartment, and Bigby instantly can smell blood, and they go in there and there's blood everywhere, and "No more happily ever after" is written in blood on the wall. Bigby investigates, because that's kind of what he does, while Snow White berates him. She also berates Jack. Jack was Rose Red's current boyfriend. They were a couple. And Bigby ultimately comes to the conclusion that Jack is the one that murdered Rose Red and has him arrested. That ends issue 1. We move into issue 2, where we have the Flycatcher, who is a janitor. And we find out that one of the 3 little pigs is crashing on Bigby's sofa. The purpose of this is to establish that there is a place outside of the city called the Farm, where all of the fairy tale creatures that can't fit into mundane society live, and all the human characters kind of live in the city. Now, the pig in question says that Bigby owes him because Bigby blew down his house. So we get that, the 3 little pigs and the big bad wolf thing. Prince Charming leaves the waitress and leaves her a note basically saying, "I've taken some money, I'll be back, blah, blah, blah." Just showing what a conniving dick he actually fucking is. Snow White and Bigby Wolf meet, and Bigby basically says this was done by one of our people, not one of the mundanes, because that message is too specific. Then we move to this character here, who is Bluebeard. Those of you that don't know who Bluebeard is, Bluebeard would marry women and then murder them after the wedding night. So Bluebeard is practicing his sword fighting with Cinderella. He makes a point to say that you aren't back in your glass slippers. So he's kind of teaching Cinderella how to defend herself. Prince Charming and Snow White meet up, and we find out that the reason they divorced was because Prince Charming had in fact slept with Snow White's sister. He insists that she seduced him, but we may never know. Back in the detention center, they are questioning Jack, and we come to find out that there was a period where Jack and Rose Red had broken up, and Rose Red had started dating Bluebeard. So now we have another suspect thrown in the suspect pool. They keep interrogating Jack. Jack is insistent that he's innocent. Bigby and Snow White are trying to get to the bottom of this. Snow White has basically put herself into the investigation, and that makes Bigby a little suspicious because, as he will come to later say, what better way to change the direction of a crime that you've committed than by instigating yourself into the investigation of that crime. Bigby puts the pig back on the truck that goes back to the farm, and they go to interrogate, or question I should say, Bluebeard. Bluebeard at first is very open about his answers. We find out that he and Rose Red weren't just a couple, that they were betrothed to be married. They were fiancés, and Rose Red had actually signed a contract stating as much. Bigby then accuses Bluebeard of being the murderer, and Bluebeard basically tells them both to fuck off, but he does have $1 million reward for whoever killed Rose Red. So Bigby takes Little Boy Blue and the Flycatcher to the apartment underneath Rose Red's apartment and asks them to recreate the crime scene with pints of blood. He wants to find out exactly how many pints of blood there were in the initial crime scene so that he can determine whether or not Rose Red is actually dead or not. A person can lose only so much blood, so they start throwing blood around. At this point, Snow White is called before the leader of the Fables, who is Old King Cole. As you know, he was a merry old soul. And he basically says, why did I get a phone call from Bluebeard saying that he has been accused of murder? He is one of our biggest donors, and we need wealth like that to keep this kind of Fables secrecy up. At this point, we learn that there was someone called the Adversary who took over the land where the Fables lived, and the Fables had to flee, but some of them managed to flee with a lot of their wealth, Bluebeard being one of them, and they're the Fables that are kind of keeping things together as opposed to the Fables that have nothing and that have to work menial jobs and things like that. So we get a little bit of backstory, all very interesting. Here, Snow White lets the mayor know how the investigation is shaping up and how it's coming along. The mayor is like, fucking get it done, but stop pissing off the wealthy people. Bluebeard has his ogre henchman guy. Sorry for the noise. Again, washing machine. Prepare a dish. We have Bigby bringing his computer, the computers that Jack had in his apartment, because we get the feeling that Jack is kind of this entrepreneur who tries to do these get-rich-quick schemes like Jack and the Beanstalk and things like that, but they never work out for him. So he had a bunch of computers in his office. We can see that there's the flying monkeys from the Wizard of Oz here. Bigby asks Snow White to go through the computers for him because technology really doesn't work with him. They're still trying to recreate the crime scene, and then they can work out how many pints of blood they used to do just that. Bigby is about to take lunch down to Jack in the cell. The security guard, of course, is Grimble. He's kind of asleep. Grimble is like, why does this guy get so much food? And Bigby's like, what do you mean? Well, Bluebeard was just here with a meal, Cornish game hen or something. And Bigby rushes down to the cell. And as he does so, we see he transforms into the big bad wolf. Bluebeard has Jack on the bed. He has a knife to his throat, and he is demanding why he killed Rose Red or where Rose Red is. Bigby basically is trying to de-escalate the situation when everyone comes to help, and we have Snow White with a sword. They manage to get Bluebeard away from Jack. He ends up locking Bluebeard up in the detention center. He explains to Snow White that, why'd you come? I didn't really need your help. And he's like, Bluebeard's a better swordsman than you. She's like, but this is the Jabberwocky's Vorpal sword, which can decapitate someone with one slice, which I thought was pretty cool. Bigby, when he's at home, gets a phone call from the guys that he sent to organise the crime scene, and then he finds out exactly how many pints of blood were used. He goes to see Snow White, who is still working, and he lets Snow White know that there is no way her sister is alive because there were so many pints of blood. Missing a human can't exist with that many pints of blood out of their system. This is all leading to what is called Remembrance Day, where the Fables have this giant party and they remember the land before the adversary came and took it. So we have Beauty and the Beast arriving to this party. It's kind of like there's an auction and it's a charity gala. Prince Charming previously asked Snow White to help him auction off his title and his lands. He doesn't want to be a prince anymore, he just wants the money. And he knows that the lands and the title are useless if they don't go back to where they originally came from, that's been taken over by this entity called the Adversary. He sees Snow White at the Remembrance Day Gala, and they kind of talk about past times, pissing Snow White off. Like, she's a very headstrong character in this. And then we get the backstory of the Adversary's attack and everything told in a speech by King Cole. And they all raise their glasses in remembrance. So we now find another character. This is Pinocchio. Pinocchio is a real boy. However, Pinocchio is fucking mad because when the fairy turned him into a real boy, he stays as a boy. So he never ages. And he gets very, very frustrated over that. We have Jack and Bluebeard talking with Bigby. At this point in the story, Bigby kind of knows what's going on. We see in the kitchens with the pig who is kind of there. Bigby comes, he made Snow White agree to be his date. There is a purpose for that. And they end up dancing on the dance floor. And Bigby kind of lets her in on the fact that he has a plan. In typical Agatha Christie style, we see Bigby bringing everyone up to kind of the roof where there's a swimming pool. And he lets them know that, in fact, Rose Red is not dead. She has been in disguise and she has been faking her death with Jack. And there is a reason for that. So, basically, Bigby knew from the start that she wasn't dead. He knew that the crime scene had been staged. And the whole purpose of the staging of the crime scene was basically because they thought that they could get money out of Bluebeard. Rose didn't want to... They needed money because one of Jack's enterprises fucked up. Rose, of course, didn't want to marry Bluebeard. But they hatched this elaborate kind of scheme so that in the end, ultimately, Snow White manages to sort everything out. Bluebeard gets his money. The prince gets what the prince has coming to him. Prince Charming gets what Prince Charming has coming to him. And the King Cole gets the Bluebeard's kind of donation that he makes every year, which he was withholding because of this whole kind of mess. And then Snow White and Bigby have a tender moment on the roof of a building. They've kind of made up. She was pissed off with him for a while there because he withheld information from her. And then we have a story by Bill Willingham, who is the creator of Fables. We have like this short story, which is pretty cool. And that is the first 5 issues of Fables. What did I think of this graphic novel, this series? I'm a huge fan of Fables. I love the different takes on the characters. I love that they make Snow White this badass bitch. I love Bigby Wolf being kind of a werewolf. Snow White and Bigby's relationship gets a little more entangled the further you go on, but for the moment, the murder mystery of Who Killed Rose Red was a great opener, a great 5-issue opener to this series. So there you have it. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Follow Hugh Newton, Ian Van Gammett, and Luke Carman on Amazon. We have more projects in the works for Plaguelands Media, so keep an eye on that. But most importantly, stay safe, have a fantastic rest of your weekend, and of course, please, read a fucking book, people.